Welcome to Highland League Weekly, the podcast, which is taken from the Press and Journal's Highland League Weekly web show, where we put the spotlight on the Breedon Highland League. You can watch this week's full episode of Highland League Weekly with highlights of Brora Rangers against Rothes and Fraserburgh against Formartine United over on the Press and Journal website, but that's subscribers only, so you would need to become a subscriber to the P&J site. The good news at the moment is that you can become a subscriber via our sport pack, and that will give you access to the full complement of our sports coverage, including Highland League Weekly. I'm Ryan Cryle. I'm joined by Callum Law and Paul Third, our regular Highland League Weekly panellists. And our main game this week, as previously mentioned, Brora Rangers against Rothes. It ended 6-2 to the champions on the day where they got the Highland League flag. A strong start, but Steve Mackay, the Brora manager, Callum, kind of felt they took their foot off the gas. But they did have chances in that second half, but I mean, they were home and dry by that point, weren't they?
I mean, it was, you can maybe wheel out the cliche, it was a bit of a, or put a tweak on it, a bit of a performance of two halves from Brora, but I did think, as you said, Ryan, they still looked a threat in that second half. They were still, I mean, I thought Max Ewan in particular for the 90 minutes was outstanding throughout and a sort of constant thorn in Rothes' side, but like the first half was a sort of usual, almost what we've come to expect from Brora, free flow and entertaining attacking football, in the way this, you know, some of the sort of interchange between Jordan McRae, Shane Sutherland, Connor Bunce, Max Ewan, Tony Dingmo, Craig McKenzie, the sort of mid-front six almost like was really good to watch. And it was, as Ronnie Sharp sort of said after the game, Rothes struggled to deal with it up until the point where they sort of changed their shape and went to a back five, and they were able to sort of stem the flow a bit. But the unfortunate thing for the Speyside by that stage was that the game was effectively already over. But as you're like, from a Brora point of view, it was very much job done and a good way to start the season, I thought. But I can also understand where Stephen Mackay's coming from in terms of he didn't want the sort of standards to drop and that wee bit of slackness to maybe creep in, and he just felt it did creep in a bit in the second half. Just
to keep you abreast of the scorers in that one, Jordan McRae, Shane Sutherland, Mark Nicholson and Connor Bunce had Brora 4-0 up. Jake Thompson then scored from the penalty spot for Rothes before Max Ewan and Jordan McRae again made it 6-1 by half time. Jake Thompson with another penalty in the second period. Rothes, Callum, just to briefly touch on them, they won't be judged this season on results against Brora, but I did think it was quite a promising performance from them.
Elements, I mean, the way they sort of got blitzed in the opening 20 minutes, half an hour, wasn't so promising. But I think there was certainly that second half. I know Brora maybe weren't at the same level, but part of that was down to how Rothes competed as well in the second half. So I think, as Ronnie Sharp said, the second half, they would take encouragement from that. I thought there was a couple of players as well that looked positives for them. Robbie Lean, that was his first in the middle of the park. If you were watching the highlights, the guy with the mullet, quite a tremendous mullet and moustache combination he had. I was very impressed with that, aside from anything. But that was his first game playing in the Highland League. It was when Nairn County's a youth, and then he's been at Nairn St Ninian, and Ronnie knows him, signed him. That was his first game, and I thought he looked a really energetic, sort of combative presence in the middle of the park, and I think he could have a big season for Rothes. I think the other one as well, Jake Thompson, obviously converted to 2 penalties, but it didn't happen too often, but on the occasions when Rothes were able to sort of get the ball in behind down his side and get him going in behind, I also think with his sort of pace, especially with Ross Logan being out injured at the moment for Rothes, his pace is quite a good outlet for them. So I thought he, aside for the goals, I thought his display was reasonably encouraging as well.
Lean on top, but fat at the back. All right. Okay, game 2 from the weekend, our second camera game on this week's Highland League Weekly main show over on the Press and Journal website. Fraserburgh 2, Formartine United 2, a nice Aberdeenshire derby for us to start. Luke Emmett and Scott Adams, they netted early for Formartine, but Scott Barber reduced the arrears before half-time, getting on the score sheet early this season. Then Keenan Simpson scored from the penalty spot in the second half after Scott Barber won the spot kick. I think there's going to be a bit of debate about whether this was...
I think we're going to disagree here.
I'm getting grief already. I was getting grief off camera before we came through.
Make your case.
There's a tug in the arm, the player goes down. If there's contact, the referee's going to give a penalty.
For me, I'll completely disagree. I don't think it's a penalty. I think it's very clever. What I would say is it's clever striker play by Scott Barber. He's used his experience. There is a wee bit of contact, and he's
Sorry, you want to say that again? There was a wee bit of what?
No, he touches him there. My argument would be is
the contact sport.
Is the contact enough to make him fall down? I don't think it is. I think the issue partly is I think the referee, his positioning, he can't. For me, the angle he's got, he's looking across and he can't really see what's actually happening. Whereas our camera angle from where that is, you see that it's just sort of arm to arm like that. For me, I just think it's good striker play, but it's not a penalty for me.
Belsley's screw job.
Are you wanting to be a...
If it was... it's one of them where I think and I can managers and players watch this, if it was against their team, I think they'd all have complaints.
Formartine started pretty hot. I mean, a lot of chances. Potentially could have scored more goals in the game. If you're Fraserburgh, you don't want to be starting slowly as that. But it was the first game of the season, so we can maybe let them off.
I think
Mark how he won, but we can.
I think in terms of, aside for the penalty, you're speaking about those chances, and they maybe are, when you look back, the wee turning points in terms of, there's the Hamish Ritchie one and the Roddy McAllister one at 1-0, and also at 2-1, Graham Rogers one that just flies over. I think if Formartine had got that third goal for me, I think they would have gone on and won, and I was quite impressed. I thought that for what we saw in the highlights there, the front four, Rory McAllister with Scott Adams, Michael Dangana and Hamish Ritchie playing behind, I thought they looked quite handy and some decent patterns of play there. But the Broch at the same time, you would never discount them, and the other sort of turning point really is that goal just before half time, because again at 2-0 the game's at half time, the game's never over, but just getting that goal, and that was a classic Scott Barber goal, really using his body and then a good finish. Getting that goal just before half time gives them that lift and that bit of impetus, and I think that was the thing all through the second half was, there was always that encouragement there for Fraserburgh, and it's said all the time, but you'd never discount them in that kind of situation. They've got that sort of never say die spirit, and in the end that helped them get the point that they got in the end. And I think just for all that, realistically, you would say it's a better point for them than it is for Formartine, just because they've had to come from behind.
I mean, it's hard to say if Scott Barber's calves get bigger or his socks get shorter every season, looking at this week's highlights, if you've seen them. Okay, let's move on. 7 more games in the Breedon Highland League in the first weekend to discuss. The standout one, Inverurie Locos 0, Clachnacuddin 5. I'm sure you've seen this score. Goalless first period at Harlow Park, but in the second half, there was a Greg Morrison goal. James Anderson, New Boy, Kuba Lashinsky, Fergus Adams and Andy McRae all scoring for Clachnacuddin, showing their various attacking threats. Like James Anderson's goal was an acrobatic one. Mark Ridgers still found time to get sent off in goal for Clach for, I think, perhaps a...
handling outside the box.
Yeah.
But
Anderson's goal's a screamer.
This is, for me, unquestionably the result of the weekend. Not necessarily because Clach won, because I wouldn't say that was entirely unexpected, but the manner of their victory and the emphatic nature of it. And I mean, Conor Gethins has always been pretty bullish about what he believes Clach can do and what they would hope to achieve and things. And as he said himself after the game, some people maybe think I'm crazy, but results like Saturday show he's got every right to have confidence in his team, because that was a hugely impressive performance and result, really. And when even you just look at the context a wee bit, that was without their 2 first-choice centre-halves as well, in Josh Meekins and Harry Nicholson. And I mean, Greg Morrison played at centre-half, and I'd say he's one of those guys that can probably play anywhere, really, and he'll be pretty solid for the team. But, if Clach have those guys back and have him further up the pitch again, that maybe adds an extra dimension to them. But all round for the Lily Whites, just a dream start to the season really. And for Inverurie, I don't think it's something you could have seen coming. And I thought some of Dean Donaldson's quotes afterwards were quite telling in terms of that he said in the second half, the lost goals that he'd never seen a team lose in his time in management, which is pretty damning, really.
Bit of a shock to the system for Locos, but we'll see how they get on in the next outing. Okay, Brechin City 4, Lossiemouth 0 now. On our preview show, when I predicted James Anderson, well, to be fair, predicted Connor Bunce for player of the season and was like, good weekend. James Anderson scored that goal. I thought, good weekend for
Things change quickly.
Scorer. But Grady McGrath going back to Brechin and scoring a hat-trick in his first game, having 2 seasons ago been player of the season, top goal scorer. That wasn't good for me in my prediction. Mitchell Findlay got Brechin's other goal, but Grady McGrath just, doing what we'd expect.
Well, he made me look like a bit of a Wally as well, because I said I didn't think Brechin had enough goals in their team, and then that was on Thursday and he rejoined on Friday, so I think clearly now they do have enough goals in their team, because 69 in the 2 seasons he was there previously, and back with a hat-trick speaks for itself.
Is he alone enough to address the lack of goals perhaps last season Brechin had?
Goes a long way towards it for me.
He's a focal point, and but some of the players around him as well.
He's just, for me, he's just just as that knack. He gets in the right positions and he's a natural finisher. He's not, by his own admission, he would say I would like the other side of the game in terms of maybe hold up or link up player that, or like winning a lot of headers in the air and things like that. He would tell you himself he's nearly best at that, but in terms of goal scoring you can't argue with his record. But I think on the other side of that game on Saturday, like Lossie to a point will take a bit of encouragement as well. I think Steve Porter was reasonably happy with the first half, but once they lost the penalty to go 2-0 behind, then it maybe became a wee bit of a long afternoon. But I think it's not a bad start for Lossie, and like we said with Rothes, their season won't be defined by games against the likes of Brechin.
Banks of Dee 2, Turriff United 2. Now Banks of Dee at home on the opening day find themselves 2-0 behind. Turriff made a good start. Miller Keir put them in front, and Andrew Watt doubled their advantage from the penalty spot after Murray Cormack. Callum singing his praises. On Thursday, he won the penalty. Second period though, another player that's got a knack for scoring goals in the Breedon Highland League, Andy Hunter, got a double to pull the home side level. My reflections on this one would be that's a promising start for Turriff to go there and be 2-0 up. It's to then, just take the 1 point. They'll maybe be disappointed with that, but Banks of Dee, one of the strongest teams in the league, and already a draw for them, which was obviously their Achilles heel last season.
Yeah, their record at Spain Park last season was something that was a source of frustration. Josh went and touched on that at full time, didn't he, saying that we need to be better at home. So it did feel like 2 points drop for Banks of Dee, but under the circumstances, it's the first day of the season. Everyone's got that opening day optimism. I think if you're 2-0 down and you come back to get a point, whether it's home or away, you're feeling, well, we've maybe got out of jail here, and at least let's just take this and move on and make sure that there's no repeat.
I think for Turriff it's a hard one, because I think if they'd been offered a point before the game, they would have been quite happy with that really. But then when you're 2-0 up, there is that part of you that goes, well, you'd fancy managing to sort of see the game out and go on and win it. But Warren Cummins was like, in terms of the performance he got out of his players, he was very happy. And I think Miller Keir is an interesting one because he's just 18, striker, brother of Lyle, plays for Buckie, signed from Hull Russell United juniors, and where he scored a lot of goals in their league. And I think he's one of these, there's a lot of these players you sort of look at and go, are they going to be the sort of one this season as a real sort of breakout season? He is potentially one of those sort of players. And I'm not just saying that off the back of Saturday. I did kind of feel that before, but I think certainly for his first game in the Highland League, that was a good start for him on Saturday.
We'll believe you. It's fine. Buckie Thistle 1, Nairn County 0. Stoppage time winner in this one to get the Jags off the mark with a victory. Darryl McCarty scored that. Nairn's Miller Gamble was sent off in 65 minutes. What are your reflections on this one?
I think it's that old thing with the last minute winner. It's Buckie will be absolutely cock a hoop, and it was a right, excuse me for maybe being a wee bit vulgar here, but a right boot in the stones for Nairn really, and Wayne McIntosh's first game in charge. I think by the sounds of it, and both for a game that only had one goal, for what I've heard, it seemed like quite an entertaining encounter. Both teams had chances, both goalies had made saves and that. I think Lewis McKinnon maybe felt Buckie had a bit more of the chances, maybe should have been ahead before they did. But I think for Buckie, really, it's the sort of start they were looking for, and maybe just continues on that momentum they had at the tail end of last season. And I was interested to see as well that the assist for the goal was Finn Allen, who I've spoken about quite a lot on here, and it looks like he's going to be an important player for Buckie. And Darryl McCarty, to be fair, somebody who always is, for a defender, he's always good with popping up here and there with important goals. And knowing Darryl, I'm sure it would have been a very subdued celebration after he scored on Saturday.
Deveronvale 3, Wick Academy 2, perhaps the thriller of the weekend. This one, Deveronvale were behind twice. Mark McGregor put Wick ahead before Fergus Alberts, the Vale new boy, scored his first goal for the Banthers. McGregor struck again for Wick as they retook the lead, but Alberts netted a second goal of the afternoon as well before another Vale new boy, Austin Sparks, gave Vale all 3 points. I mean, if you're Gary Wood, don't do that every week, come from behind twice. But, I mean, if, you're delighted if 2 of your new signings are the guys that make the difference.
Definitely. It's funny, you could be Gary Wood. You must think alike. That's exactly what he said on Saturday evening.
I don't know if that's a compliment.
Was the idea? If I was Gary, I'd be a wee bit concerned about that. But he said ideally on Saturday, he said ideally we obviously wouldn't go behind twice, but he was really pleased with, I think, the performance overall in terms of some of the chances Vale created, and just the way they came back and that. And I mean, great start for some of these new signings. And I think Fergus Alberts, I'm really interested to see how he gets on this season, because he's beat, for somebody that's only early 20s, he's been around the Highland League a fair bit, in that he's been at Huntly, been at Inverurie, been at Turriff, and it's never quite happened for him for one reason or another. And then he went to Dice in the juniors.
Did really well there.
He was excellent for them, and I know there's a few teams would have liked to have signed him in the summer, and Vale obviously won the race to get him. And it's maybe just that thing where he's had that experience now of playing regularly, scoring regularly. Is he coming back ready to really do it in the Highland League? And on Saturday's evidence, you would say, yeah. And they had Ryan Park, who's gone back to Vale for Inverurie, playing up front with him. And there maybe be some games where they maybe don't always play sort of 4-4-2 and things. But I think if they are playing that 4-4-2 formation and they've got the 2 of them up top, because they're both big lads as well, it could be a real handful for a lot of defences in the Highland League. And certainly Saturday was a very encouraging start for them. And I mean, Austin Sparks as well getting the winner. I mean, I don't suppose if you're a Deveronvale supporter, you could have scripted that much better. For Wick, new season, but felt a wee bit like the same old story where Gary Manson was lamenting their ability to defend balls into the box. And I can see why, because they've gone away from home. Mark McGregor's scored 2 goals, had 5 teenagers in their lineup, and by all accounts they did well. And you look at those factors and their performance, and if they defended a bit better, they should take something out of the game. But he just said it felt like every time the ball went into their box, it was going to cause a problem, and that's where Deveronvale's goals came from. Ultimately, what didn't help the Scorries either was their 3 established centre halves, Owen Harold, Owen Rendell and Joe Anderson, were all missing on Saturday. So that said the what if, but if you potentially had 2 of those guys maybe in there as you would normally have, then it's maybe a slightly different game.
Were they playing summer football?
No, injured.
Okay.
All 3 of them injured.
Forest Mechanics 1, Huntly 1. Kyle McLeod gave the Can-Cans the lead. The Black and Golds got James Conley sent off for a challenge of Martin Jameson. But just shy of the hour mark, they scored an equaliser, a leveller, through Sam Robertson. I thought Steve McDonald, the Forest boss, in his quotes when he said, I don't think we did enough to get all 3 points. We're 1-0 up, a man up, and going ahead at half-time. they've had one chance and scored from it. Didn't see enough from ourselves after that. I thought it was a pretty succinct, bit like an assessment that gave you a pretty solid idea of what happened.
Very much so. He told you a lot, and I think even as he sort of said he didn't see enough, it's like even in the second half, once it went sort of 1-1 and things, I think for the, having the advantage and probably the pressure they had for us, would be disappointed they didn't create a bit more, given the players they've got. With all that being said, it's what Stephen said, it's clearly, given this context, a better point for Huntly, given the length of time they were down to 10 men. I thought, having seen it, that James Conley's sort of challenge was reckless and needless, really, in terms of the area of the pitch it was in. I think it was just sort of born out of frustration because he'd overrun the ball, and it was just unnecessary, and it put his team in a bit of a hole. I think the other thing Forrest would probably be disappointed with, looking at it back, is how they defended the goal, because it's a good pass actually to put Sam Robertson in on the right side, but Sean McCarthy comes out with his goal to sort of close it down. And I think it's easy saying with hindsight, but I think if Sean maybe stays back on his line, maybe Sam Robertson crosses it or something, or he puts it right in the top corner, but I don't think he's necessarily scoring for the position he was in, whereas Sean sort of coming out probably made his mind up in terms of just trying like dink it by him, and the goal's there. So I think, as you read Stephen's quotes, I think for Stephen McDonald, just frustrating from the sort of position they were in to start the season in that manner. But for Huntly, if they'd said you'll play 50 odd minutes with 10 men and get a point, I think they'd have been pretty happy.
Okay, one more to discuss then. A good start for Strathspey Thistle in the Breedon Highland League this season. 3-1 win at home to Keith. Probably a team that you would expect to be one of their rivals this term. Sean Morrison scored in either half for the Granton Jags. Josh Race got the other goal. Aaron Angus was on target for the Maroons. Josh Race, unbelievable goal, according to Ryan S. And I haven't seen it. Have you seen it?
I haven't yet, but hopefully will. I hope to see it. If for those of you that are watching the episode on the P&J website, by this stage we might actually have the goal in for you to enjoy. But aside from that, just a great start for Strathspey, really. I mean, Sean Morrison, was signed for Forrest, who I know that Ryan had been keen to bring in for a while, 2 goals. And aside from maybe the goals, I think with his pace and his energy, he just brings something different for Strathspey this season at the top end of the pitch, in terms of he likes playing on the shoulder and gambling, and he'll always ask that question in terms of trying to go in behind a defence. So I think whether he'd scored or not on Saturday, I think he would have been he would offer something that Strathspey have been needing, but for him to start in the way he did, really pleasing for them. And Josh Race actually was goal. He is somebody who, in terms of like his touch, and whether it's like set piece deliveries or shots or things, he has got that bit of class about him. So not a huge surprise maybe if he scored an outstanding goal. I think for Keith, for what Craig Ewan said afterwards, bitterly disappointing to start as they did, and I think they sort of got spooked a wee bit by sort of losing the opening goal the way they did. And I know with their sort of start to the season, I know they were sort of keen to get something on the board on Saturday and sort of try and make a decent start, because you look at this week and they're at home to Brechin on Wednesday and away to Banks on Saturday, so tricky run of games.
Yeah.
While Ryan Essen takes his side to Rothes in midweek, so
could be another potential rival this season. Could be setting themselves up for mid-table Strathspey. Like that. We'll see. Okay, well that's all of the games from Saturday's first weekend of Breedon Highland League action discussed. Just a reminder, if you'd like to watch highlights of Brora Rangers on Flag Day against Rothes winning 6-2, and Fraserburgh 2 from Formartine United 2 from Bellesley, you can do that by watching the main Highland League Weekly show over on the Press and Journal website. To do that, you have to be a subscriber to the P&J, but you can subscribe at the moment via our sports pack for the low price of, I think, perhaps £1 for your first 3 months. If that offer's still standing, good. In the meantime, until we see you next week, please follow us on our various social media channels. We're on X, we've got a Facebook group that's very lively, and we'll keep you up to date there with all the latest Highland League Weekly goings on. But yes, until we see you next, thanks to Callum, thanks to Paul, and enjoy the football, whichever games you're watching.